Hey, get inspired, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in to yet another episode of Life Inspired. This is a program where we hear all about how and why people are following Jesus Christ. And so it's really exciting. Typically, we're talking about a turning point moment. There's life was going along. There's a ... moment in your life where and then God stepped in and changed your trajectory to a new path, and now you're walking an inspired walk. Most people have several, and we're going to talk to Dan Biggs today, but I want to ask you to please like our Facebook page, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you can also watch these or share these programs from lifeinspiredshow.com. Lifeinspiredshow.com is another way that you can watch or share these programs. And so don't forget, we are recording virtually. I'm in the studio, TJ's way over there, and Dan is at home. Dan, is that where you are? This is Dan Biggs.
Yeah.
Welcome, Dan Biggs from Rick's
Thanks for
Auto
having me.
Body. Thanks for being our guest today.
I appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. We're so glad to have you. So we're going to go ahead and just dive right in. Rick, I know you from our BNI group, Business Network International group, and because you're at Rick's Auto Body, and you gave a 10-minute speech to our group, because we all BNI people do 10 minutes, and you talked about, how you want to do Rick's Auto Body differently. Tell us about the turning point that you're going to talk about. I'm sure you have several. What's the backstory to the one that you're going to share?
Well, I would say, I don't know where the backstory begins, but so I was raised in faith, raised Pentecostal, and that's a church with a pretty heavy doctrine, and we went to that church from when I was 5 to when I was 15. But my dad just had a slip, and he had an affair on my mom, and then left the family. And in turn, after that happened, we just lost relationships with the church, and just life took over, and people became people, and so we drifted away. But drifting away just didn't mean stop going to church. And just within a couple years, so when I was 16, I was in high school, and I guess when I was towards God when I was younger, I was all focused on God. But when I went the other way, I just went the completely opposite way. So I was using drugs, and I was drinking pretty heavy in high school. And but then when I was 18 years old, my dad actually invited me into the bars with him, because he knew a lot of the owners, and I was able to get that early access into that environment. And I really liked the environment because I liked hanging out with the older people, and I liked that type of party and atmosphere. And that's where I stayed for quite a few years in the bars. And I got a fake ID, so it made me even legit. And then when I turned 21, I really enjoyed gambling. My family's had generations of gamblers and drinkers, and I fit that. So I went that direction. I gambled a lot. I drank a lot. I had a lot of tangible worldly assets, and just went really diving into that lifestyle. So is this where you want me to talk about my turning point?
Yeah, great. So what was the turning point?
So I mean, I lived that life probably for 10 or so years, and I met a girl, which we became seeing each other, and she got pregnant, and her name's Roberta, and now she's my wife. So we did everything wrong. She had a couple of children before we came together, and then we had my son before we got married, and then I decided to get married, but continued on in the same lifestyle as far as, trying to. So I thought that being a good family man meant just providing income. I didn't value any of the relationship with the family, because my dad really never did. He was just a worker. He'd always make sure we provided for.
Right.
But when it came time for the nurturing and just the love of a father, he didn't do it. So I thought I was doing better than my dad. So then I got a boat on Lake Michigan, a really big boat, so that I could take my whole family with me and then continue this lifestyle. But I was in Las Vegas, and me and my dad used to go out there for the Super Bowl all the time. And there was a big Super Bowl party there, and I had been dealing with some anxiety. So I had just anxiety was just overtaking my life, and I had a major anxiety panic attack on an airplane ride out to Vegas, and that was a couple of trips before this. But after that, I came back, and then I went to the doctor and I was like, I got to do something about my anxiety. And he said, well, your lifestyle is absolutely terrible. I mean, you're drinking way too much, you're smoking, you're doing all of these things in your life. So you need to start Xing these out. So that's what I started doing. And I quit smoking. And then I decided I would stop drinking really, really heavy and just drink lighter heavy. And then I started exercising and I started doing all these steps to try to lose this anxiety. And then me and my dad, so the doctor ended up giving me Xanax to be able to fly, because the flying, being that it triggered that one anxiety attack, really just stuck with me. So I was petrified to fly, but I knew I had to do it because I wasn't going to be able to drive to Las Vegas for 3 days. And that part of the lifestyle was still really
Right.
important. So I remember I was in a casino and I was in Treasure Island. I remember right where I was at. I was in a slot machine. I had partied really hard the night before. This was the day of the Super Bowl. I was in the slot machine, and the way a hard drinker is, and I had drank heavy that night before, but when you have a really bad hangover, and I never got that whole pure oxygen in Las Vegas. I got really hungover there too. So, but when you're really hungover in Las Vegas, the best thing that you can do is just start drinking in the morning. So it was right after
Okay.
breakfast, and my dad seen me, and he's like, well, it looks like you need a beer. And I said, well, man, I feel really bad, and I just don't want that. But I just thought that was the way to do it. And I drank that beer, and it wasn't cold enough, and I almost lost it all over the casino floor. And that was a turning point. That was a pivot point where I knew I had to return to my faith, and I knew I had to go back towards God. And I made a commitment on a casino floor to God right then and there that I would not get drunk again, because I was just done with that lifestyle. So that was the biggest part of my pivot, that I turned back towards God.
Wow.
So it was, mine wasn't at the altar, born again, saved kind of moment. So I took baby steps to get back to get to the point where I was at now. And so, I still drank a little bit, and then I started going back to a church. I started taking my family to a church, but eventually, just baby step after baby step, I let go of all that. I let go of all of those old vices. I really got rid of most of my tangible assets, and I've just started fully intentionally serving God.
Wow. So what does that look like? What does fully intentionally serving God look like?
So I think that the best way to describe it is more of a servant type of lifestyle, and not, well, the old Danny was really selfish, and he was, I was really all about me and what, just like our relationship here, what could I use Miss Bennett for to gain in my life? So who do you know that I could work for, this and that? But I would say serving God creates, being that we follow Jesus Christ, it creates a servant driven heart. And you really search out, what's my purpose? So why was I created in this life? Because I believe that God gives us all
Mm-hmm.
a purpose from birth until he
Right.
takes us home. And that's where I'm focused at now, is my purpose. And I believe my purpose is loving people. And I happen to have the vehicle of collision repair. My dad did teach me how to repair cars, and I value that, and we're really good at that. And I can use, so there's some pastors that have churches, some that have missions, some that have food banks, but I'm able to use the collision repair and the body shops as a way where I can bring somebody help that might not get it from another place. I'm not saying that there's not other good shops. I'm just saying that that's my vehicle to be able to serve out my purpose and live the life that I believe that God has for me.
That's awesome. So, I mean, when people have had a wreck, it's kind of sometimes, sometimes it's like just nothing. They were just at a stoplight and somebody crashed into them. But sometimes somebody had a wreck because there's something in their life that's wrecked, and it's kind of a symbol of it. So, like, it's probably a great time for them to come to a place like Rick's Auto Body and find that somebody loves Jesus and doesn't want to gouge them in the repair of the vehicle and stuff. You just want to fix it and help them, and right?
I think that, yeah, that's a good example. But another, we go to the auctions to where vehicles are totaled. So, if your vehicle's been in a collision and the insurance company deems it a total loss, they send all of these cars to these auctions,
Right.
and then guys like me go in and buy them. So, according to
Okay.
the insurance company, this car is worthless. but we're able to go in and get some select ones that aren't hit and that don't have structural damage, don't have airbags deployed, and we're able to rebuild those cars and actually make them just as nice, if not nicer than before. So as far as the walk of the believer or the walk of a human being, I mean, we're all pretty much worthless until God gives us purpose. So you could use that a little bit better of an example than just say the accident, to where we go in, we find these cars that have been deemed a total, we rebuild them, we give them purpose, and we set them back on the road. So I always like talking about that when we use the collision repair.
I love that. That's fabulous. Very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. So I always like to ask people this last question. I mean, you've already said what was life like. You talked about the turning point, and you said what inspired life looks like. But I always say that everybody connects to God differently as your thumbprint or fingerprint or your retinal scan. Everybody connects to God differently. But some thumbprints look more like other thumbprints. And so I always like to ask my guests, what is it that you do to stay inspired? How do you get your inspiration every day? How do you stay walking with God, that you keep that purpose in the back of your mind all the time and have that right mindset? How do you do that? What does that look like for Dan?
Well, it's impossible for me to keep the relationship or keep the focus without prayer. And I have to have my daily discipline of prayer. And a lot of people call it the devotions, but I read scripture every day, and I make sure to take a certain amount of time out of my day and I pray, because this walk it does not have earthly rewards. It is, you have to look at the eternal, because like I was saying yesterday, it's not a popularity contest. I mean, you don't put on a sign, hey, we love Jesus, and that just doesn't bring, the customers in, but you have to have that connection. So just the same way as I connect with my wife, I talk with her, I have a conversation, we have that relationship, and that's what keeps us together and tight. I have to have that relationship with Jesus Christ every day, because if I slip, then I miss out and I start fading back. So that, I would believe, is the key to my relationship.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing, Dan. We're so grateful to have you.
Appreciate you having me.
Thank you. So I'm gonna tell you guys a little bit too. You can find Dan at Rick's Auto Body, but if you also want to just connect with him through our vehicles on our Facebook page or our YouTube channel or lifeinspiredshow.com, just message us in any one of those locations and we'll put you in contact with Dan so you can have maybe some virtual coffee as we're doing this social distancing. We record these ahead of time, so I don't actually know if the social distancing rules will be lifted by the time this airs, because they're changing that every single day when they're going to lift those. But so thanks for sharing. And yeah, if you want to meet with Dan, I know you'd be willing to have coffee with somebody or whatever, even if it's virtual coffee, right, Dan?
Absolutely. We're open for business, so they can come in our shop too.
Right. Very good. All right. Well, thank you guys for watching. Please do share this with somebody. Maybe you know somebody that's in the dark place that Dan was. And you know what? You said you didn't kneel at an altar. Yeah, you did. You did. Yeah. Right there in the casino floor. That was his altar's there. He was just there with you. So anyway, thanks for sharing. Thanks for watching. You guys send it to whomever you think needs it. Have a great week. Bye-bye.